Have you ever wondered why some people seem to attract opportunities and prosperity, while others struggle every day without getting anywhere? Imagine if you could change that simply by changing the way you think and feel. Today, you'll meet Daniel Lee, an ordinary young man who was stuck in an exhausting routine, mired in debt, and believing that wealth was only for other people. But then something unexpected happened. Daniel discovered the law of attraction. At first, it seemed like just another distant idea, almost impossible to believe, but he decided to give it a try. Little by little, his thoughts, visualizations, and gratitude began to create real-life signals, opening doors he'd never imagined. What was just hope began to transform into concrete results, and Daniel began to see opportunities arising as if the universe responded directly to his energy. Today, he lives a life of financial freedom and realizes dreams that once seemed unattainable. If you want to discover how small mindset shifts can create massive transformations in your life, stay with me and follow every step of Daniel's journey. And if you haven't already, click the subscribe button, like it, and comment on what you'd like to manifest in your life. Follow along now as Daniel went from fatigue and debt to a life full of prosperity. Daniel Lee was always seen as that hard-working guy, but he lived in the shadow of a dull routine. Every day the alarm clock rang at the same time, the same crowded bus, the same tired look reflected in the bus window. It was as if time was passing in circles, bringing no new developments, no glimmer of hope. He tried to cheer himself up, but deep down he knew he lived only to pay bills and wait for the next month. To passers-by, Daniel seemed in control, but inside he felt a huge void. The exhaustion wasn't just physical, it was also a feeling of being trapped in a destiny he didn't choose. He looked around and saw people thriving, achieving things, realizing dreams, while he was merely surviving. That hurt more than any lack of money in his pocket. Late in the afternoon, when he arrived home, Daniel would find himself reflecting in front of a simple, too-silent room. There was a heaviness in the air, as if the walls carried his own frustration. He would silently ask himself, "Is this the life that awaits me forever?" These questions echoed into the night, unanswered, only deepening his unease. What Daniel didn't realize was that, even in this repetitive cycle, something inside him still insisted on dreaming. Deep down there was a subtle, almost imperceptible flame that made him believe that perhaps there was a different path. This spark was fragile, but real, and would become the seed of a change he couldn't yet imagine. And it was precisely this flame, hidden among his fears and frustrations, that would lead him to discover something that would change not only his routine, but his entire way of seeing the world. Daniel always worked hard, but the truth is, money seemed to slip through his fingers. His salary barely made it, and he was already tied up in overdue bills, accumulating bills, and seemingly endless loans. It was as if every effort he made was swallowed up by a bottomless pit, leaving him always at the same starting point. He tried to organize himself, but each month a new unexpected expense arose. Medicine, a higher electricity bill, an urgent repair. The result was always the same: more debt, more pressure, more sleepless nights wondering how to escape that financial maze. The feeling was suffocating, as if he were trapped in an invisible chain. In conversations with friends, Daniel hid the burden he carried. He avoided talking about money, smiling to hide his worry. But inside he felt small. Comparisons with others loomed like a constant shadow, reminding him that he seemed to be the only one not moving forward, the only one unable to prosper. This emotional burden was as heavy as the financial one. It wasn't just the lack of money that hurt, but the feeling of having no control over his own life. He saw himself as someone always chasing after something, never achieving anything concrete. The future, for Daniel, seemed to be just a repetition of the present. But even in this scenario of limitations, there was something curious. The more the pressure increased, the more a need to find a way out grew within him. It was as if life itself, by squeezing him, was pushing him toward a discovery that would soon change everything. In Daniel's mind, wealth was a privilege reserved for the few. He grew up hearing that money doesn't grow on trees, and that for the poor, life is nothing but suffering. These phrases, repeated so often, became silent truths within him. He believed that prosperity was the preserve of those born with a silver spoon in their mouth, or those with rare luck. Whenever he saw someone achieve something great, he thought, "This isn't for me." This inner voice, filled with insecurity, made him believe his efforts would never be enough. No matter how hard he worked, he always felt destined to be one step behind, as if success had a no trespassing sign written on it. These beliefs shaped his behavior without him realizing it. He avoided taking risks, let opportunities pass him by, and even diminished his own dreams. After all, why desire something that according to him would never be achieved? This blockage was like an invisible glass. He saw what he wanted, but could never touch it. Inside, he felt like he was constantly fighting against an insurmountable wall. It was like rowing against the current, tiring himself out but never making progress. And the more he thought this way, the more his life reflected exactly what he believed: limitations and scarcity. But even wrapped up in these paralyzing ideas, Daniel still didn't know that a simple encounter with new knowledge could begin to break. Little by little, the chains that kept him trapped. Daniel's nights were long and heavy. He lay in bed exhausted, but sleep didn't come easily. His mind felt like a whirlwind of thoughts, replaying overdue bills, pressing deadlines, and the feeling of always being one step behind. The pillow, instead of a resting place, was a silent confessional of his anguish. During the day, the routine repeated itself like an endless film: grueling work, few rewards, and a body constantly on edge. The clock seemed to mock him, dragging slowly, as the days blended into a suffocating monotony. It was as if life had pressed the pause button on his dreams. Amidst this scenario, frustration became a constant companion. He looked at himself and asked himself, "Is this all there is? Work, pay bills, and wait for the weekend?" These questions echoed like a void, a reminder that his existence seemed to be limited to survival. Sometimes, in the silence of the early morning, Daniel found himself imagining what it would be like to live differently. But these reveries were quickly stifled by the harsh reality that surrounded him. It was as if his mind was torn between the desire for something greater and the belief that it was unattainable. But just at this darkest point, when life seemed to be pushing him down, something unexpected was about to come his way, planting a new idea in his weary mind. One night, in the middle of one of those sleepless nights, Daniel was scrolling through his phone without much expectation. Amidst the news and distractions, a video appeared, almost like an unexpected invitation. The title talked about creating your own reality, and at first he laughed suspiciously, but for some reason he decided to click. The narrator's calm voice seemed to pass through the screen, speaking directly to him. "Whatever you focus on expands," the message said. Daniel was intrigued. The idea that his thoughts could shape his life sounded absurd, but also strangely comforting. For the first time in a long time, something piqued his curiosity. As he watched, he felt as if each word opened a window into his mind. It was as if someone had finally told him that perhaps he had more power over his own path than he realized. He didn't fully believe it, but he couldn't ignore the spark that was beginning to ignite. After the video, Daniel lay there staring at the ceiling. The phrases echoed in his mind like a silent mantra. Could it really change my reality just by changing my thoughts? Doubt and hope walked side by side within him. It was thus, almost by chance, that Daniel found the seed of something that would transform not only his nights, but the entire course of his life. In the days that followed, Daniel couldn't get those words out of his head. He laughed at himself for believing, even for a second, that thoughts could change his financial life. It seemed like a fantasy, something too far removed from the harsh reality he faced. Yet, there was something different in his heart. Every time he remembered the video, a glimmer of hope crept into his doubts. It was as if his mind, accustomed to the weight of hardship, was opening to a ray of light. That tiny seed wouldn't leave him alone, insisting on germinating even amidst the dry ground of his disbelief. Daniel found himself reflecting as he worked, looking at the stack of papers on his desk and wondering, what if it's true? What if I really have the power to change something? The doubt no longer paralyzed him, but began to spark a curiosity he'd never felt before. Even though he was afraid of appearing naive, he decided to do more research. He watched other videos, read some articles, and realized that many people were reporting incredible changes. He still wasn't sure if he believed it completely, but he couldn't deny that something inside him was being stirred. Little by little, that once strange idea began to gain space in his mind, opening the way for a new chapter that he had never even imagined living. Even though he harbored doubts, Daniel decided to take the first step. He bought a simple notebook and one silent night began writing down his financial goals. His hand trembled slightly, as if he were daring to put on paper dreams he'd previously kept only in his head. He wrote modest goals at first: pay off debt, build an emergency fund, get a raise. They seemed distant, almost impossible, but the simple act of writing brought him a strange sense of lightness. It was as if each word were a breath of fresh air amidst the suffocation he was experiencing. In the following days, Daniel returned to the notebook, adding details. He imagined himself living debt-free, traveling, working on something he enjoyed. Sometimes he laughed at himself, finding it a bit childish, but at the same time, he couldn't stop. It was like playing at dreaming again. Still not fully believing it, he began to realize that the act of writing things down gave him a certain focus. Instead of just thinking about problems, his mind was now opening to possibility. He didn't know how or when it might come to fruition, but he could already feel a different spark in the air. And it was in this timid, almost naive movement that Daniel began a practice that, little by little, would begin to reconfigure his way of seeing the future. With the notebook in hand, Daniel began to close his eyes and imagine himself living what he had written. He saw himself walking through a brightly lit house, with no bills strewn across the table. He felt the relief of opening his wallet and finding money left over, not lacking. These images took on vivid colors in his mind, almost as if they were already real. At first, it seemed like just an exercise in imagination, a mental game to distract himself from his busy routine. But the more he practiced, the more intense the sensations became. He realized that as he visualized, his heart filled with hope, as if he were experiencing a piece of the future in the present. These scenes created in his mind began to replay at different times of the day. On the crowded bus, in the middle of work, before bed, Daniel allowed himself to feel the anticipated joy of a debt-free, free and prosperous life. It was like savoring a dream before even achieving it. Interestingly, this practice made him wake up feeling more energetic. The same routine that had previously seemed suffocating now felt less heavy. It was as if the weight was lifting, not because the debts were actually gone, but because his mind was now connecting to something bigger, lighter, and more hopeful. Without realizing it, Daniel was planting a new reality within himself, a reality that would soon begin to show signs in the world outside. Despite his visualization practices, Daniel couldn't shake an insistent voice inside him. It was that part of his mind that constantly reminded him of the past, of the failures, of the failed attempts. "Do you really think writing in a notebook will pay your bills?" this voice whispered, thick with irony. Sometimes, all it took was one unexpected event in the day for all the negative thoughts to come flooding back. A late payment, an unexpected charge, even comments from co-workers were enough to bring to the surface the feeling that everything was just an illusion. In these moments, Daniel felt as if he were experiencing a silent battle between two forces. On one side, the timid hope that was born in his heart. On the other, the disbelief that seemed to have deep roots. And this struggle was taking place, not outside, but within himself. It was painful to realize that the biggest obstacle wasn't debt or the exhausting routine, but the thoughts themselves that insisted on dragging him down. With each new practice, he had to confront this inner shadow that tried to convince him that nothing would change. But even on the hardest days, something kept him from giving up. He didn't know it yet, but this persistence in the face of resistance would be the key to taking the next step in his transformation. It was during one of these reflective early mornings that Daniel read a simple phrase, "Gratitude turns little into enough." He stopped, took a deep breath, and realized that until then, he had only focused on what was missing. He had never allowed himself to appreciate what was already present in his life. The next morning, he decided to give it a try. Before leaving for work, he wrote in his notebook 3 things he was grateful for: the roof that protected him, the hot coffee on the table, and the health that kept him going. At first, it seemed like a silly exercise, but soon he noticed something inside him beginning to warm. As the days passed, this habit grew. Daniel was grateful for a colleague's smile, a sunny afternoon, even a bus arriving on time. The world around him seemed the same, but his perception changed. It was as if the colors became more vivid and life less burdensome. This practice brought a sense of lightness he hadn't felt in a long time. By focusing on what he had, rather than just what was missing, Daniel began to notice a shift in his energy. His heart beat calmer, his mind became more open, and little by little hope ceased to be a spark and became a flame. And it was in this state of gratitude that the first unexpected signs began to appear, like little messages from life, showing that he was on the right path. It was then that curious things began to happen. Daniel noticed small coincidences, like finding exactly the amount he needed forgotten in a drawer or receiving an unexpected discount on a bill he was already worried about. These were simple details, but enough to awaken in him the feeling that something was changing. One day at work, a colleague mentioned a free personal finance course. Daniel, who would have previously ignored it, decided to sign up. He couldn't explain why, but he felt the invitation was a gift sent at just the right time. It was during this course that he learned valuable tips that have already begun to ease his financial burden. Furthermore, he began receiving invitations to conversations that seemed to be answers to his questions. Strangers shared experiences that fit exactly with his questions. It was as if the universe was discreetly but steadily opening doors. Each small event strengthened his confidence. Daily gratitude helped him see these moments not as luck, but as signs that he was aligned with something greater. This new perspective made him believe in the process even more. Daniel began to realize that the more he vibrated with gratitude and hope, the more life responded with opportunities. And best of all, he felt this was just the beginning. Daniel began to realize that his life wasn't changing just because new opportunities arose, but because something inside him had already changed. Before, he saw everything through a lens of scarcity. Now, he saw it through a lens of possibility. It was as if he'd changed the filter of reality itself. He noticed that when he woke up, he no longer thought only about the day's problems, but about how he could grow, learn, and develop. His mind, previously trapped by limitations, now opened to imagine scenarios of abundance. This simple shift in perspective transformed his energy. Prosperity, he understood, didn't begin in the wallet, but in the heart and mind. The more he cultivated thoughts of abundance, the more prepared he felt to receive what he desired. It was a new feeling, being at peace, even before things actually changed in the outside world. This inner state made small victories grow into enormous ones. Paying off a debt, for example, was no longer just an obligation, but proof that he was making progress. Each step became a reason to celebrate, and this celebration further fueled his confidence. Daniel was discovering that the true key to prosperity was not exhaustive effort, but the harmony of thought, emotion, and action. And this discovery was about to be tested by a greater challenge. Everything seemed to be going well until an unexpected setback struck. A large expense suddenly arose, and Daniel found himself once again with a heavy heart and a mind tempted to sink into despair. It was as if all the progress he had made was at risk of crumbling. At that moment, the old voice returned with a vengeance. There's no point in dreaming. In the end, you always end up back where you are. These words echoed inside him like a hammer, testing every ounce of his newly formed faith. The fear that he was simply deluding himself lingered in his mind. Daniel spent days in doubt, almost giving up on his practices. The notebook seemed distant, and gratitude no longer held the same color. He felt torn between believing in real change and giving in to the weight of his old belief of failure. It was like walking a tightrope, but amidst this turmoil, he realized something different. Despite the setback, there was a part of him that refused to give up hope. This part whispered that perhaps this challenge wasn't a punishment, but a test, a chance to show himself that his transformation wasn't dependent solely on easy days. And it was on this fine line between giving up and persisting that Daniel discovered that the biggest enemy was not the lack of money, but the lack of confidence in continuing. Amidst the emotional storm, Daniel took a deep breath and decided to revisit the notebook he'd set aside. Rereading those goals he'd written with such passion, he remembered he hadn't started this journey to give up at the first hurdle. He felt a quiet strength reborn within him. He resumed the practice of gratitude, albeit in a simple way, giving thanks for small things: the bed he slept in, the food on his plate, the health to keep fighting. Each word of thanks worked like a brick, rebuilding his lost confidence. Daniel also re-envisioned his life as debt-free and prosperous. He closed his eyes and saw himself smiling, at peace, surrounded by abundance. Even though reality still presented difficulties, these images fueled his hope and changed his mindset. Gradually, he realized that strength didn't come from controlling everything, but from trusting the process. He now understood that life didn't have to be perfect for him to stay aligned with his dreams. Challenges were just part of the journey, not the end. And so, with a calmer heart and a firm mind, Daniel moved forward, without imagining that the next step would be marked by an achievement that would change the course of his life. Shortly thereafter, something unexpected happened. Daniel received a job offer he'd never imagined, a well-paying freelance project, precisely in the field he wanted to tour. At first, he thought it was a fluke, but the smile that appeared on his face said otherwise. The opportunity seemed to have fallen from the heavens, a direct response to his visualizations and gratitude practices. For the first time, he felt his internal efforts beginning to reflect in the external world. It was concrete proof that small mindset shifts really do work. Accepting the project brought not only money, but also confidence. Daniel felt a new energy, as if he had unlocked a door that had previously been locked. Each task completed, each positive feedback fueled his belief that he was on the right path. A sense of freedom slowly began to manifest. He no longer saw work as merely an obligation, but as a bridge to something greater. Life, which had previously seemed rigid and predictable, now revealed possibilities he hadn't even imagined existed. And it was with this first concrete victory that Daniel realized that his dreams were no longer just ideas in a notebook. They were becoming reality, opening space for even greater achievements ahead. With his first victory, Daniel began to notice a curious pattern. Each achievement seemed to pave the way for another. A successful project led to a recommendation, which brought in new clients, and soon his schedule began to fill with unexpected opportunities. Each positive step strengthened his confidence, and at the same time, attracted more favorable circumstances. It was as if life was responding directly to his energy, rewarding his perseverance and his faith in practicing the law of attraction. Furthermore, abundance wasn't just financial. Daniel felt his social circle expand, new ideas emerge more easily, and his creativity flourish. Each small achievement seemed to multiply possibilities in different areas of his life. The feeling of stagnation that had previously held him back gradually disappeared. He no longer saw limits in his routine. Each day brought new doors, new opportunities for growth and learning. His inner confidence was reflected in concrete actions that produced real results. And so the domino effect continued, silent but powerful, signaling that what began with small steps was about to transform into something even bigger and more surprising. Daniel was no longer the same tired young man who looked at his routine with discouragement. Now, each morning brought motivation, energy, and a sense of purpose that had previously seemed unattainable. He rose with a subtle smile, ready to face challenges with confidence. Daily tasks, once burdensome, now seemed like opportunities to learn and grow. Every activity, every interaction had greater meaning and contributed to their goals. It was as if life had gained more intense colors and nuances of possibilities that had previously been hidden. People around him began to notice the difference. Daniel radiated a positive and confident presence, and this attracted new connections and opportunities. The internal transformation was being reflected externally in subtle but powerful ways. More than money, he now had clarity of purpose. He knew what he wanted, how to act, and most importantly, he trusted that he was aligned with a greater flow of prosperity. Life was no longer a repetitive routine and became a journey of discovery. And in this new state, Daniel prepared himself for even more surprising experiences, without imagining that the pinnacle of his financial transformation was about to reveal itself. Over time, Daniel began to clearly see the effect of his practice. Everything that was happening, the small signs, the opportunities, the expansion of his income, was no coincidence. He realized that every thought, every visualization, and every act of gratitude had shaped his reality. This awareness brought a profound sense of personal power. He understood that it wasn't just external effort that attracted prosperity, but the energy he put into each thought. Life responded to his focus, reflecting what he nurtured within. Daniel began to observe every detail of his journey carefully. Moments previously considered trivial now seemed like messages from the universe, reinforcing that he was on the right path. Everything fell into place, as if each piece of a puzzle had been placed in the perfect place. Joy didn't come solely from money or external achievements, but from the certainty that he could create his own reality. This clarity transformed his relationship with the world. Instead of feeling at the mercy of fate, he felt like the protagonist of his own story. And it was at this point that Daniel understood the true power of the law of attraction, not just changing circumstances, but transforming the very way of living and perceiving the world, opening space for even greater results. Over time, Daniel finally saw his financial life completely transform. Debts were paid off, opportunities multiplied, and the security that once seemed impossible became part of his daily life. The sense of relief and freedom was almost palpable. More than money, he gained confidence and clarity of purpose. Every dream that once seemed distant, travel, studies, personal projects, began to become reality, step by step, as a result of his determination and constant practice of the law of attraction. Those who followed his journey noticed the difference. Daniel now radiated a light, optimistic, and inspiring energy. He became an example that true change begins from within, with thoughts, emotions, and actions aligned. Even in the face of his achievements, he never became complacent. Each victory was a reminder that the universe responds to what one believes, and that life is always open to new possibilities. Abundance became more than a goal. It was a way of life. And in this open horizon full of possibilities, Daniel felt that true wealth was not only in what he had achieved, but in the transformation that had occurred within him. preparing him for even greater dreams. What Daniel learned is that prosperity isn't a matter of chance, but of conscious choices and the energy one puts into each thought. With faith, gratitude, and focus, he discovered he could shape his reality in surprising ways. Every small gesture, every visualization, every act of gratitude served as a bridge to something greater. Life responded not by luck, but by aligning with the vibration he emanated, transforming dreams into concrete experiences. Daniel now knew that challenges are not obstacles, but opportunities to reinforce beliefs and strengthen the mind. Each difficulty overcome, each fear conquered, served as fuel to move forward toward a full and abundant life. He realized that true wealth begins within, in the heart and mind, and that the law of attraction is a powerful tool when used with intention, consistency, and gratitude. The world outside is merely a reflection of what we cultivate within. And as he looked to the future, Daniel knew his journey was just beginning, inspiring all who want to rewrite their own stories and achieve prosperity that once seemed impossible. Daniel Lee's journey shows us that true prosperity begins within. With faith, gratitude, and focus, he was able to transform thoughts into actions, and actions into concrete results. Every challenge he faced was, in fact, a necessary step toward building the life he always wanted. He learned that obstacles aren't signs of failure, but opportunities to strengthen his mind and align his intentions. The law of attraction, when applied consistently, proved to be a powerful ally, allowing once distant dreams to become reality. Today, Daniel lives not only with financial stability, but with clarity of purpose, motivation, and confidence. His story inspires the belief that anyone, in any situation, can rewrite their own story. And you, who follow this journey, can start applying these practices to your life right now. Remember, small steps, focus, and gratitude can generate surprising transformations. If you're not yet subscribed to the channel, take the opportunity to subscribe, turn on notifications, and continue receiving inspiring stories that can change your life.